Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and I decided to tape another video today because my poem video was pretty short, and I had another idea percolating. And this is based on several videos I've seen over the past week or so about making your own Booker dozen. And so the idea here, I saw it first on Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and Scott challenged other booktubers to also make this video. He said he stole it from Charlotte Malloy, and then I just saw also Brian's version on Bookish. So I will link all those videos and also the big Wikipedia list of Booker titles. So what the idea here is that there is a big master list where you can look at all the books that were on the Booker long list, short list, and winners throughout the years. And it is a tremendous list of hundreds of books. And it was really fun to look at because there are lots of books in there that I have read and dating back before I was really that aware of the Booker Prize. And so there are a lot of surprises on there that I did not know or had forgotten were Booker long list books at one time. And so the challenge is to pick out a dozen and sort of have a Booker of Booker lists. So I went through and I'm looking at this list and I thought, okay, let me see if I can do this. And first I noticed that the really old ones from the 60s, I hadn't read that many of those books. And then as it progressed, I started picking up in my reading what I had actually read and remembered around 1980-ish. And then from there, there was many books that I had read. And so I started jotting down. I said, well, I'm not going to write all the ones I've read down. I'll just write down the ones I strongly remember that I liked these books. And all of a sudden, I had like 32 books. Like, well, that's not a dozen. So then I had to make these hard cuts to come up with a dozen books. One of my rules that I imposed on myself to help was if the author had multiple books and I had read the multiple books and loved all the books, I had to pick just one representative. And I picked the ones that my other criteria was, in looking at this book again, do I suddenly have a strong feeling that I want to put it on my reread list? Is it calling out to me to go back and read it again? Because, I'm all about the rereading. So that's where I've come up with this 12. I feel like I could make a whole other video about the 12 that I'm shocked were on this list. So there's many fine things I could explore here. But let's just do what the challenge was supposed to be. So I am going to talk about these in publication order. And I forgot to cross-reference here in my little notes about if they were, if they actually won. So I will look when I do my editing and I will put something up there if any of these were actually the winner. All right, so let's begin. The first one is the oldest one, but it's also the one I've read the most recently, and that is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I talked about it very recently. It is a short, wonderful novel. It takes place just after World War I, and it's about a young man who goes to a small village for the summer to restore a painting in a church steeple that has been covered over or whitewashed over the years. And in the course of this summer, he's also seeking some personal healing for his war trauma and his sadness over his wife running off with another man. And he thinks that he will just be isolated in this bell tower to rest and be quiet while he works on this painting, but he instead becomes very drawn into the lives of the villagers. And so it's just a beautiful short novel. I'll probably talk about it again when we get to Shorty September as a recommendation. But and it's a great summer read. So I really loved A Month in the Country. The next one, it's also not too long, but this is a very funny book, The Van by Roddy Doyle. I used to read Roddy Doyle's books very regularly, and he is on this Booker long list or Booker master list a couple of times, and I like all the books that are on there. But this one was this is a laugh out loud funny book. And it's part of a little trio of books that have to do with people in the same family, which also includes The Commitments and The Snapper. And it is about a man who starts a fish and chips, what we would now call like a food court truck, and with family members, and the misadventures and disasters and chaos. So imagine kind of like The Bear, but it's in a van with a bunch of family members. And in the year is 1990, and just there's a lot of screaming and disasters and an infamous moment when a diaper falls in the deep fryer. So this was just a really fun book, and now I'm thinking about, of course, I want to read it again. And you know, lately his novels have been kind of hit and miss for me. So for a while there, anything new he came out with, I read it, whether it was a funny one or a serious one. And then the last couple, I've liked some things, and other things I just either wasn't interested in at all, or I haven't gotten to them. So let me know if you've read any of his more recent books, if there's something that I'm missing out on that I should pick up. All right, the next one I really want to reread, and that is The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields. And it's one of those books that goes through all these decades of life in this woman's life. I love books like that when they're really good, that go through a person or a family saga. But the little description says, born in 1905, Daisy Goodwill drifts through the chapters of childhood, marriage, widowhood, remarriage, motherhood, and old age. Bewildered by her inability to understand her own role, Daisy attempts to find a way to tell her own story within a novel that is itself about the limitations of autobiography. So all I have right now is that residue of loving it, but it's been so long since I read it, I want to read it again. The next one is from a heavy hitter who has appeared many times on the Booker long list, and that is Margaret Atwood with The Blind Assassin. I think that this is one of the books that actually won, but I will double check. She's on it many times. I've read them all that are on there. I liked or loved all the ones that were on there, but I picked this one mainly because it's the one that I most want to read again at this moment. And also, I love the cover of this book. But as I recall, this book had it had some interesting things going on with the structure, with a book within a book. It is about, here's the beginning of the description. The novel opens with these simple, resonant words. 10 days after the war ended, my sister Laura drove a car off a bridge. So that is, Iris is looking into her sister's death that occurred in 1945. Then there's a novel within a novel that is a science fiction book and called The Blind Assassin. And then there's Iris again in 1947. It takes place through the 30s and 40s. I don't remember the details. I remember I absolutely loved it and was telling everybody to read it when I read it. Now, of course, I want to read it again. All right, the next one is another author who has appeared on the list multiple times, and I had to choose one, and that is Sarah Waters with The Night Watch. Sarah Waters is one of my favorite contemporary authors. I get everything she puts out, and I usually love it. So this one was hard to narrow down and choose, but I picked this one because this is one that I feel like at the time that I read it, I thought that it was my favorite of her books. And I don't know if I read them all again, would I still pick this one out? I don't know. But earlier this year, I reread Fingersmith and I enjoyed it again, but I think I loved this one more and I want to reread it. And this one takes place during World War II. It moves around between 4 different people who are living in London, and it has to do with the time of the air raids, and I think there's an ambulance driver, and of course the plot has become terribly murky, but I know that I did love it, and it was one of my favorite World War II based novels. Don't you love the complete lack of information I have on most of these books while telling you that they're my favorite books? That's what you get when you come to read and reread. All right, we have a couple more. The next one is Washington Black. Washington Black is the story, and this author is currently the Booker chairperson this year. But this is a story of a young boy who is enslaved on a plantation in Barbados, I think. Let me check. Yeah, he's on a sugar plantation. There's these two brothers and that run the plantation, and one of them's worse than the other one. But there's a kid named Washington Black who is incredibly smart, and his talent is noticed by one of the brothers, and he picks him out to be his manservant and to be his assistant in his scientific studies. And this guy is trying to build a flying machine. Something happens where that necessitates a quick departure from this plantation, and they begin some travels. And Washington Black grows from a kid to a man. It has a lot to do with the interesting relationship between Washington and the guy, what's his name, Christopher, their relationship, and Washington trying to make his own way eventually in a hostile world. So that is a book I'd like to read again. I remember I read several books close together that had to do with the stories of enslaved people and their quests for freedom, and this one really stood out to me as probably at the top of the pile, or neck and neck with the Underground Railroad, which I'm also going to talk about in a second. In fact, I think, yeah, that's actually the next one, The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, which was another unusual take on the legacy of slavery. So you already know I'm a big fan of Colson Whitehead, and this book, it was a really tough read, but it's really a beautifully written book, and it has to do with one woman who leaves, she runs away, and she gets on the Underground Railroad, which in this particular novel is presented as an actual underground railroad that travels across America, and you can get out at different stops. And at the different stops, there's different versions of racism and alternatives to being enslaved that are also not acceptable. And she's also haunted through her life by unresolved questions about her mother, who had disappeared when she was young. And she never knew, she's always assumed that her mother ran away and that maybe someday she would find her. And we as readers also don't know what happened to her until the very end of the book. And I thought that the TV production of this also was quite good, even though they made some changes, of course. But I thought that they, for such a kind of a tricky, structured book and so many themes, I thought that they did a really good job of putting together the story and the themes and the emotional heft of this novel in that production. So I recommend the show as well. I have two more that are from last year's list. No, maybe there's three from last year's list. And I am suffering from the effect of the most recent things calling to me. And if I actually reread everything, it might be a totally different order. But I cannot leave without talking about The Trees by Percival Everett. This was the first book I read by Everett. I read it last year, and it will remain one of my favorite books forever and ever. And it's incredibly powerful. If you haven't gotten to it yet, and you have somehow managed to escape the many, many times that I've brought up The Trees, I really hope that you will take some time and give The Trees a chance, because it is powerful. It is the craziest book in that it manages to be devastating, the most dark, depressing, horrific, maddening events, but also laugh out loud funny at times as well. I don't know how he did it. I will forever be in awe of this achievement, but he's written books that are serious and sad, and he's written books that are farcical and goofy, and somehow he did both in this book. And I know it didn't work for every reader, but it worked really hard on me. And then also from last year's list, I really love Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This tiny and powerful. And I just read that they are making a movie of this. I don't know if it's a movie or a TV parts movie, but they are making this, and the main character, Bill Furlong, is going to be played by Cillian Murphy. So I am really interested to see how they do that. And then I also, in my last spot, I was torn about 20 different ways. And so I decided to go with another book from last year because I remember it the most vividly, and that is Oh, William by Elizabeth Strout. I think it's kind of an underdog on this list because it's the book number 3 so far it's a quartet about Lucy Barton and her ex-husband William. But I thought that I'm just a big Elizabeth Strout fan, and I thought this was the best of those 4 books so far. Some people love Lucy by the Sea the most. Some people love My Name is Lucy Barton. I think the other book is called Anything is Possible. But Oh, William was my favorite of the 4. And I do recommend that at some point you start with My Name is Lucy Barton. And if you like it, work your way up to Oh, William. I don't know how it goes if you read it just by itself. I don't know how that comes across because they have some history that it kind of helps to have read. But it is about a couple that are, I think Lucy's probably about 60-ish and William is older. He's about 10 years older. And it is about a time where he's in the midst of a breakup of a subsequent marriage, and he asks Lucy to go with him on a trip. And I don't want to give too much about it away, but there's so much in here about the long history that 2 people can have. It's very spare, her style, but somehow it's very powerful. I guess I kind of like books like that sometimes. This would be another one where less is more. And then other times I read these big giant honkers that go on for 500 pages. So I don't know. I'm inconsistent in my taste. But that is my Booker dozen. There are so many runners-up and oddball titles that I did not know were even on the Booker list here. But that is a video for another day. I hope you found something, a new idea for reading in this list, maybe something you have never read. Let me know what you think about my selections or what you would substitute in, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye.